There are currently 166 prisoners awaiting execution in the state of Alabama. This is part 5 of the series. Let's see what crimes these people committed and how many years they spent on death row so far. Jerry Devane Bryant, 25 years on death row. Burt Brantley and Donald Hollis traveled from Newville to an AutoZone auto parts store in Dothan on January 27, 1997, where Brantley bought transmission fluid sealer to fix his car. When they heard someone whistle at them, Hollis and Brantley were traveling along Wheat Street in Dothan. According to Brantley's testimony, Jerry Bryant and another man, Ricky Vickers, approached the automobile after Hollis turned around and stopped. Vickers left shortly after, but Hollis, Brantley, and Bryant remained together. Brantley and Bryant were drinking in the back seat while Hollis was driving the vehicle. Later in the night, Bryant pulled a gun, asked Brantley to get out of the car, and then drove off with Hollis. Bryant was charged with the murder of Donald Hollis, and several people testified against him, including his girlfriend and his other friend Ricky Vickers, who was in fact coerced into helping him get rid of the body. Bryant is now 54 years old. Joseph Clifton Smith, 25 years on death row. Police in Mobile County, Alabama found Dirk Van Dam's severely battered body on November 25, 1997, inside his mud-caked Ford Ranger truck. According to Dr. Julia Gooden, a forensic pathologist with the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences, Van Dam suffered 35 separate blunt force injuries to his body before passing away. He also had a huge hemorrhage beneath his scalp, brain edema, many rib fractures, a collapsed lung, numerous abrasions to his head and knees, and defensive wounds on his hands. His neck, shoulder, and back bore markings that were compatible with those left by a saw. The most likely immediate cause of death was the numerous rib fractures that led to the collapse of one lung. Joseph Smith and Larry Reed were found guilty for robbing and murdering Van Dam. Smith is now 53 years old. Nicholas Bernard Acklin, 25 years on death row. For the 1996 killings of 4 individuals and the wounding of 2 more in a case that is still renowned for its brutality, Acklin and Joey Wilson were both given death sentences. Corey Johnson, a third defendant in the case, was freed in 2011 after serving 15 years in jail for felony murder. Brian Carter, 21 years old, Michael Bodette, 19 years old, Johnny Couch, 18 years old, and Lamar Hemphill, 21 years old, were among those killed. At the age of 17, Michelle Hayden was shot in the face, elbow, and abdomen. Ashley Rutherford, who was 22 at the time, was shot in the back of the head but managed to live by acting dead. In a separate capital murder case, Johnson is accused of stabbing to death Candy Wilson, Joey Wilson's sister, in November 2016. Acklin is now 52 years old. Calvin Stalworth, 25 years on death row. Nancy Dukes was found behind the counter on her knees with her arms and face in a chair on December 4, 1997, when John Gregory entered the Dukes Parkway Shell patrol station in Foley. Despite being repeatedly stabbed, she was still breathing. Dukes passed away before the paramedics came, despite Gregory's appeal for help. Dukes had been stabbed around 40 times, according to the coroner's testimony, and she died as a result of those wounds. There was evidence that the cash register had between $400 and $600 gone. At the Diamond gas station and convenience store in Foley on December 14, 1997, Van Gardner found Linda Morton's body lying face down on the floor behind the counter. Morton had been stabbed 6 times, according to the coroner's testimony. The cash register was $934 short, according to an audit. On December 16, 1997, police learned that Calvin Stalworth was wanted for violating his probation as a result of their investigation into him. Police arrested and interrogated him on the 2 killings and got a search warrant to examine the house of his fiancée where he was staying. Blood was found on the inside of one of the sleeves of a hooded garment that police seized. The blood on the jacket matched Duke's DNA. A kitchen knife with a serrated edge was also discovered under the mattress during the investigation of the home. Experts testified that the knife used to kill Dukes and Morton was the same model. Stalworth is now 53 years old. Melvin Davis, 25 years on death row. When he passed away, Timothy Ray was 27 years old. At point-blank range, 7 shots were fired at him. 67-year-old John Bradley was killed by 3 execution-style shots fired at him from a close distance. At the time of his headshot, Eugene Smith was 50 years old. Amazingly, he made it through and provided testimony in court. As the informant in a drug case against Davis and his brother Princeton Davis, Charlie Boswell Jr. was the target of the murders. When the shootings took place, Boswell Jr. was not even in the house. Davis is now 52 years old. Forrest Tanisha Johnson, 25 years on death row. Johnson received a death sentence for the 1995 slaying of a Birmingham police officer who was not on duty. William G. Hardy, a deputy sheriff for Jefferson County, was working off-duty security when he was shot twice in the head. The government brought charges against Johnson and Ardragos Ford. The first trials for both men resulted in hung juries. Ford was found not guilty after a second trial, while Johnson was found guilty and given the death penalty. Attorneys of Johnson claimed that providing $5,000 to a crucial witness without alerting the defense constituted a breach of due process.
Attorney Richard Jaffe has helped get 7 men off death row. Now he is working on an 8th. In 1998, Forrest Johnson was convicted of murdering Jefferson County Deputy William Hardy at a Homewood hotel. Jaffe represented Johnson's co-defendant, who was acquitted. He still feels Johnson is also not guilty.
There was no tangible proof, no eyewitnesses' accounts, no confession to the police. The sole witness for the state in the case claimed to have overheard a 3-way jail phone call in which a man going by name Forrest confessed to the crime. She had never met Mr. Johnson and was unfamiliar with his voice.
For sure, 100% sure, that he was innocent. There wasn't any question.
Jaffe said the key to the prosecution's case was testimony from a woman who claimed she heard Johnson's confession.
Overheard, allegedly, Forrest Johnson talking on a jail phone, saying something that was completely different from the forensic evidence.
But the jury found him guilty because of her testimony. The district attorney of the county where Johnson was found guilty, campaigners, and a number of former judges have demanded that Johnson's death sentence be reviewed. Forrest is now 50 years old. John Michael Word, 24 years on death row. Michelle Milner Word called the Baldwin County 911 Center at 7:28 a.m. on April 22, 1997, to report that her infant was not breathing. The Word's travel trailer home was reached by paramedics 10 minutes later. While en route to the South Baldwin Regional Medical Center, the paramedics tried to revive Nicholas Word via intubation after receiving his body from John Michael Word. Dr. Robert Revel, the emergency room's attending physician, examined the child and found that he had rigor mortis, he was cold to the touch, he was not breathing, and had no pulse. When he arrived, the doctor declared the infant dead. Dr. Revel noted the absence of vital signs, abrasions on Nicholas's scalp, nose, and mouth region, pus-like material in his eyes, blood in his ears, bruises on his neck and chest, feces in the diaper, a deformity on his right arm, and crusty material in certain nail beds. Dr. Revel spoke with both parents following the assessment. The baby developed breathing issues, according to Nicholas's father, who claimed that a folding chair had fallen from a shelf and hit him in the head. The father did not believe it was necessary to call 911, despite the mother's desire to seek medical assistance. During the performance of the final rites, the mother seemed distressed, but Ward was impassive. According to Michelle's testimony, when they first started dating, Ward put his hand over her mouth and threatened to suffocate her. Throughout their marriage, Ward beat his wife violently. In the early hours of April 22, 1997, Ward suffocated to death his 4-month-old son after causing him multiple wounds. Ward is now 59 years old. Please remember to hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. Thank you. Marcus Bernard Williams, 24 years on death row. Williams had been out with pals on November 6, 1996, enjoying alcohol and pot. When he got home that night, his thoughts started to gravitate to Melanie Down Rowell, a young neighbor. Williams tried to get in Rowell's back door at 1 a.m., but the door was closed. Alongside the door, he suddenly observed the kitchen window. When he took the window screen off, he discovered that the window was not locked. He was able to enter the residence through that window. To reach the stairs leading to the upstairs bedroom, Marcus Williams passed through the kitchen. He took a knife out of a set that was in a knife holder on the kitchen countertop. He also took off his pants before going upstairs. He entered the upper room after passing through a baby gate that separated the steps from Rowell's two young children, aged 2 and 15 months. Williams entered the kids' room and discovered both of them sound asleep. He then went into Melanie's room. He climbed into bed on top of her, and a struggle started when he tried to take off Rowell's clothes. Williams had a knife, but Rowell fought him and screamed. He tried to take her clothes off once again while covering her mouth with his hand to keep her quiet. Williams encircled Rowell's neck as she fought on. Rowell eventually stopped resisting as he proceeded to choke her. William started to essay her when she stopped moving, and he continued for 15 to 20 minutes. The elderly female victim of a second break-in in the Asheville region was able to identify him, leading to the criminal's later arrest. He confessed to his role in Melanie Rowell's death in a statement he made after being taken into jail for that violation. He is now 48 years old. James Allen Johnson, 24 years on death row. Rodney Early found Lawson's body slumped behind the counter of the BP patrol station on Old Highway 78 in Jasper on August 5, 1995. She had been shot in the head and was still awake. Lawson passed away before the ambulance could get there, according to Early's testimony. Ira Morris, James Johnson's co-defendant, stated in court that he met with Johnson a few weeks prior to the robbery to discuss their intentions to rob and kill the BP station worker in Jasper. The two decided that Johnson would carry out the robbery and Morris would serve as the lookout. According to Morris' testimony, James Johnson walked up to the counter pretending to buy a drink and then put his crumpled money to the ground for the cashier to pick up. To grab the cash, Lawson knelt down. When she stood up, Johnson was holding a .38 caliber handgun at her head. He asked for money. Johnson shot the register clerk 4 times after Lawson handed him the cash. Morris claimed that he cleared the door of all traces of fingerprints before leaving during the shooting. The two got together the following day to divide the $447 that had been taken during the robbery. Morris claimed in his testimony that he was remorseful for his actions and so refused to accept any of the money. Johnson is now 50 years old. Joffrey Todd West, 24 years on death row. Joffrey Todd West and his girlfriend traveled to the Herald's Chevron in the late hours of March 27, 1997, or the early hours of March 28, 1997. This convenience store had previously employed him. He had earlier told others that he intended to loot the Chevron store, murder the person up there, and leave no witnesses. West entered the business brandishing a .45 caliber revolver, and he held store clerk Barry at gunpoint while stealing $250 from a cookie tin where the store's cash was kept. According to the medical evidence, Barry was shot in the back of the head when he was prone on the floor behind the store's counter. The wound would induce fast incapacitation and a very speedy death, the medical examiner claimed. West is now 48 years old. Melvin Gene Hodge, 24 years on death row. On the side of County Road 26 in Macon County, 2 hunters found Beth Seaton's naked body on January 5, 1998. The coroner testified that Seaton had several blunt force injuries to her head, neck, chest, and abdomen, with the crushing injuries to her chest and abdomen from being ran over by a car being the most serious. Seaton died as a result of these injuries. Her back had vertical tire prints running up and down. Near Seaton's body, a name tag from the Golden Coral restaurant was discovered with Hodge's name on it. Hodge and Seaton worked together at the Opelika Golden Coral restaurant. The restaurant's closure was one of Seaton's responsibilities as a supervisor. Hodge oversaw the staff. Police found Marlowe Murph after an investigation. Hodge allegedly proposed robbing the Golden Coral, according to Murph's testimony at the trial. When they got to the restaurant, they noticed Seaton leaving in her vehicle. After pursuing the van, they succeeded in getting Seaton to stop. Murph claimed that while Hodge was speaking to her, he entered the van and pointed a gun at her. The two then coerced her into returning to the Golden Coral so they could forcibly open the safe. Seaton was then made to maneuver her van around the area by Murph and Hodge. Seaton knew far too much, according to Hodge, so he took her out of the van and started choking and punching her. Murph testified that he left when he saw what Hodge was going to do. He claimed that after taking the wheel of Seaton's van, Hodge ran the woman over roughly 4 times back and forth. They took her car and then they ran away. Hodge is now 53 years old. Bobby Wayne Waldrop, 24 years on death row. Bobby Waldrop was born to a mother who was only 14 years old and frequently abandoned him for days or weeks at a time. He spent a large portion of his formative years with Sherelle and Irene Prestridge, his maternal grandparents. They were reportedly quite close. The Prestridge's house was where Mr. Waldrop and his wife Clara resided when he was 19 years old. Sherelle and Irene were both sick and incapable by that point. Sherelle struggled to walk and had heart and hip troubles. Irene was bedridden and blind. The couple had transformed their living room into a bedroom with 2 hospital beds due to their ailments. Bobby Waldrop and Clara checked into a hotel after leaving the Prestridge's house on April 5, 1998, and Mr. Waldrop smoked an unknown quantity of crack cocaine there. They both returned to the Prestridge's house later that evening with the intention of robbing money to acquire more drugs. Mr. Waldrop and his grandfather Sherelle started squabbling over money shortly after the pair arrived. After that, Bobby Waldrop killed Sherelle by stabbing him 43 times, while his grandmother Irene begged him to stop. Irene assured her husband that she loved him and would see him in paradise as Sherelle passed away. Bobby Waldrop went to his vehicle after killing Sherelle and took some gloves out of the trunk. He went back inside and gave Clara the order to murder Irene. Irene was twice cut and stabbed by Clara, but she was unable to complete the attack. Then, after taking Clara's knife, Mr. Waldrop stabbed his grandma 38 times. Irene told Mr. Waldrop that she loved him before she passed away. The pair was apprehended the next day. Waldrop is now 45 years old. Keith Edmund Gavin, 23 years on death row. Gavin was found guilty of killing William Clinton Clayton Jr. in 1998 and robbing him in front of a Regions Bank Center, Alabama. After completing his daily deliveries, Clayton, a contract carrier for Corporate Express Delivery Systems Incorporated, was shot and killed while waiting outside the bank in a business van. According to reports, he had pulled over to use the ATM to get cash so he could take his wife out to supper. 2 different eyewitnesses, including his cousin Devane Meeks, a worker at the Illinois Department of Corrections, identified Gavin as the gunman. Less than 3 months had passed since Gavin's release from jail following a 16-year sentence for the Chicago shooting death of an unarmed man when the murder in Center occurred. Gavin is now 63 years old. Darrell Turner, 23 years on death row. Barbara Wilson's naked body was found in her Limestone County house on February 21, 1996, by her daughter Angela Anderson. Wilson was killed by suffocation, according to the coroner's testimony. There was proof that she was essayed before she passed away. Both Wilson's 1993 Cadillac and the 19-inch Orion television were gone from her home. Angela Anderson left her 2-year-old daughter Rosalind with her mother in order to accompany a sick friend to the neighborhood hospital. Anderson tried unsuccessfully to get in contact with her mother later in that day. She suspected her mother might have left her a note while she was at work, so as she walked up the driveway after leaving work to return to her mother's home, Rosalind sprinted out, claiming that her grandma was sleeping. Wilson's body was discovered by Rosalind and Anderson in one of the house's bedrooms, where it was discovered that Wilson had died. Turner was found guilty of robbing and murdering Wilson, accompanied by 2 other friends of his. He is now 49 years old. Gregory Charles Clark, 23 years on death row. He was convicted of stabbing and murdering someone during a gas station robbery. William Fuller Ewing was discovered dead at his convenience shop on Valentine's Day 1998 on the Fort Morgan Peninsula in Gulf Shores. $14 in gasoline was taken from a pump outside the business, but after an inquiry, more than $600 in cash was still in the victim's pocket. The autopsy on Ewing was carried out by Dr. Leroy Riddick. The victim sustained 15 stab wounds, 17 superficial cuts, and several scrapes on his body, including his back, chest, face, arms, and hands, according to testimony. Due to the presence and volume of blood in each incision, according to Dr. Riddick, Ewing was alive when each wound was inflicted, and the wounds were most likely made by a knife. Ewing and his murderer, Clark, have known each other for 10 years at that point. Clark is now 65 years old. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you like the channel. See you on Friday with Alabama Death Row Part 6. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.